By way of background, I haven't really introduced myself yet, but this might be a reasonable way to start. Um, I'm from an Arab Jewish family. They were from Iraq. I was born and raised in Iran, but we were sort of expats in Iran because there was an Iraqi Jewish community in Tehran when I was growing up. And then at 14, we moved to Israel for 2 years. And that wasn't working out for my family. So they were coming back to Iran, and I came to the US, I was in Israel 14 to 16. So when I was 16 years old, I came to a boarding school in the US for the last 2 years of high school. And then I did my college work in the US. I was an international relations student. My plan was to go to graduate school in international relations. Actually, I was registered to attend Columbia School of International Affairs. Obviously, this was a long time ago. This is like the 70s, so very, very idealistic view. My dream was to work with the UN Development Program. I had actually visited them, and I had spent a semester in India doing India Study Group. During vacation, I had gone to Kabul, Afghanistan, and I had, met with the UNDP folks about, trying to do an informational interview or something to sort of maybe get a job. And sort of to put the scene here, I was at Colgate, which is in upstate New York. It's one of the coldest places on the earth. And this was like after a hard winter, spring break came along, where it's a tradition on the East Coast. All these college kids, jump into a car, they just pack the car, and it's like you don't stop except for gas. Around the clock you drive till you get to Florida, and you get in the ocean and drink orange juice and all that. So that was, so this is called spring fling trip typically. So with a buddy, we looked for rides to Florida. We found someone who was willing to do it for $25. And so that's when I met who became my future partner, this guy Archie. He was a pre-med student at Colgate. He was also graduating that summer. The previous summer, he had worked as a door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman. I know that's not done anymore, but in the old days, they really did do that. And he's just an incredibly charismatic personality. He was the #1 salesman in America. And as a reward, he won $5,000, which at the time was meaningful money for doing this. So we're driving down to Florida. I just met him during this trip, even though we were both at Colgate. The IR people and the pre-med folks didn't really have a lot of intersection. And I was telling him about my trip to Afghanistan, the time in India. He had never been outside the US. But he had a real adventurous streak as well. So anyway, he said, look, I have this, by the time we got back, he said, look, I have this $5,000, which you know how I won, etc. I'm willing to put this on the line. Why don't we go to Afghanistan for the summer? Most people, you took waiter jobs, etc. I was a room service waiter in the summer previously. We'll take this $5,000, we'll go to Afghanistan, we'll buy, quote, cool stuff, bring it back before, a few weeks before school starts, sell it, we'll make more money than our friends who are waiters and waitresses for the summer. And he's gonna go to med school, and I was gonna go to Columbia. That was the idea. And I thought, hey, it sounds cool. Let's do it. So, we went off to Afghanistan, and you've got to realize Afghanistan now, we associate all these horrible themes with it. At the time, it was really one of the pure places, so to speak, that you could travel to. It was just a wonderful place. Also at the time, there was this big phenomena where young people were, in the US and Europe, this whole overland travel to Asia through Turkey, then Iran, Afghanistan and then Pakistan, India, Nepal, etc. Afghanistan was like a dream place for that circle. It's so different than the images of Afghanistan now with the killings and the bombings and the Taliban and all that stuff. In any case, we went off to Afghanistan, but we couldn't get a flight direct to Afghanistan, so we went to Delhi, and then you could take overland. You could go to Afghanistan. And when we were in Delhi, guess what? And it was just supposed to be a transit thing for a few days. We saw this Bengal tiger skin, this big, beautiful, the most remarkable Bengal tiger skin, like museum quality thing. Now, this is really horrible idea, looking at it now. But frankly, at the time, we really didn't have the kind of this more ethical thinking about endangered species, etc. Anyway, we fell in love with this thing and ended up day 4 of our trip spending like more than half our money on this Bengal tiger skin. And the deal was, we asked the guy, and he was an amazing salesman, obviously, because he got us going just crazy in love with this thing. And he said, look, it's illegal to export from India, but no problem, I can get it out. US, getting it in the US, you can get it, no sweat. Okay, good, let's do it. So we gave him the money, and we did it. We went overland through Pakistan to Afghanistan. And then when we got to Afghanistan, it was like, what are we going to buy here? At the time, the sheepskin coats were kind of popular, but it seemed like everyone was doing that. So one thing we saw that no one seemed to be interested in were these beautiful old Afghan rifles. And these were like, the British would lay railroad into Afghanistan as part of their attempt at taking over the place. And the Afghans would essentially melt the metal, make these guns out of it, and then decorate them with beautiful mother of pearl and bone. And these were gorgeous things, as you can see from some of these images here. And they cost like $5 to $10 a piece, $15. It was also just amazing fun to go get them, because you had to go on horseback, you had to go to the tribal areas. It was just an amazing adventure. But it was also very time consuming. So we spent most of the summer collecting the guns. And by the end, we had 184 guns. It came to 2 tons of rifles, if you can believe it. And we had become friends with someone who had a clothing shop there. And he said, why don't you buy these wedding shirts, men's wedding shirts? They're very good looking. They're going to be really popular in America. So sure, so we bought 1,000 of these at 80 cents each. And we used up our 5,000. And, we also said, okay, this isn't just a one-shot deal. Listen, if this stuff really sells, we can get more. We can make money throughout school. So we got suppliers lined up. For the guns, we had these guys, Maulana Ghulam Mahmad, Haji Mahmad. These 2 were guys that were traveling with us to the tribal areas all the time, and this was a shop they had in Kabul. And they were ready to ship us more. And these are the guys that we partnered with on the clothing side. And they had already taught us, you could have cuff sleeve, puff sleeve, or straight sleeve. That was sort of our idea of fashion. So we got 330 of each of those styles. Anyway, it came, and of course we had just an amazing summer. It was really beautiful. So then, facing reality back in the US of A, the first thing that happened was the US Embassy. I was still an Iranian citizen. The US Embassy started giving me a hard time about giving me my student visa. So they delayed me, about 4 weeks. I missed Columbia's opening. So I deferred graduate school for a semester. And the Bengal tiger skin, it got confiscated by US Customs, and they were threatened. We had sent it to my friend's, to my partner's father, and they were threatening to do like giant, suit and fines and all. And he was like, take it, keep it, I don't know anything about this. He was like not talking to his son. Anyway, but we lost the tiger skin. The guns, no one wanted them. I mean, frankly, Afghanistan, people hadn't even heard of Afghanistan. And we went to a gun show in upstate New York. You probably maybe know what those are like. and they had these high-powered German guns, and, these were real killer guns. And we walk in with these flintlocks, and, and also we didn't look like the crowd at that place, so, we were laughed out of the place. Frankly, a few of our friends bought, we got $300 worth by selling to our buddies and stuff, but that was it. And the wedding shirts, they were a disaster quality-wise. They were like big stains. The sizing, the small would be giant, the large would be wrong. There was a real mess. There were spots, the colors were off, etc. So basically, this really was a disaster. I mean, and there were some real lessons here. Like, first of all, is it legal, the business you're doing? Does anyone want the damn stuff? And finally, does it work? Is this a wearable, usable thing? Horrible. But there was a silver lining. It seemed like occasionally, if you had a wedding shirt that was clean, and we started just dyeing them black and dark green and stuff to cover the spots and everything, and just sort of like measuring and saying, okay, this looks small, this looks large, sort of resizing. You could actually, these were selling, so we were doing them on, showing them at boutiques within our college town and at Cornell, and, we were visiting college towns, and, we were leaving a dozen or two of these, and they were moving. Our friend in Kabul, he had a Dutch girl visit, and she had wanted to make a bunch of special clothes for herself. So he had made a sample for us and had sent us these samples. And then one of these retailers, actually in the town Cornell University is in, he had taken 24 on consignment, 24 of these shirts from us. And they had sold, so we kept going, we were going back, hey, it's time to pay and stuff. And he'd say, I don't have it right now and stuff. Come back in a month I'll be able to pay you. So we did that a couple times. He's not paying us. And then he said, but look, I'm signed up for the National Fashion and Boutique Show. It's a fashion show in New York. I have a small booth. If you'll take half my booth in payment for the 24 shirts you gave me, we'll settle our deal. I figured we're never going to see this money. Besides New York, show, fashion, whoa, sounds great. Let's do it. So we signed up and we went to New York. And obviously we had no clue. I mean, we were so intimidated by the scene there because this was a really professional, big time show. So we basically just watched people, waited till late at night, and then tried to mimic them, try to set up the display, etc. We were there till like 3 in the morning. We go back to, the apartment of a friend's cousin, in New York. We crash. We wake up around 10:30. The show starts at 9. We're running to the show, being late, etc. And we're already a hit. This editor from Mademoiselle had seen this stuff. She had flipped out. She had brought a couple of the other editors. They said, we're doing a section on you, and we're going to be hot. Related to this, it was this, and they had told some of the buyers at Macy's, at Bloomingdale's, at Bendel's, which was really a high-end New York store. So there were notes and cards and stuff on the chairs before we even showed up. By the way, we had also seen the model, so we had called some girls from Skidmore College, which was a local girls' school. Colgate at the time was still all men, to be our models. And you can see they were also amateur city. But we were really a hit in this show. 35 stores nationwide went for it, some of these really major stores, including, there was at the time a new emerging thing, the boutique was really coming up, and they loved this stuff that we were doing. And then we were getting a ton more press. So this was really pivot 1, and pivot is one of the is a term you'll see a lot in the whole fast failure ideas, Y Combinator idea, lean startup idea. It's like you have a strategy, and then at a certain point you learn enough and you say, okay, we're going to pivot. this is what we are now. You really sort of redefine yourself and your strategy. So now it was clear, we're clothing importers. We're not gun dealers, we're not tiger skin folks. And by the way, I still have a ton of guns up in Woodside, if anyone's interested in seeing some. So we went off to Kandahar to produce this stuff. And that's where you're really trying to bring these guys, who really are like 12th century, with these buyers, New York buyers, who have absolutely no clue. They have ideas of quality and of, timing, etc., which are really not necessarily in sync with these guys. And it's a production nightmare. And it leads to just horrifically complex negotiations and bargaining between us and these guys. So like just an enormous amount of the energy is just going into this conflict and, trying to get it to work because, we're seeing the opportunity, but we know the stuff these guys are producing is a joke. So we start improvising. We try raising the price with them. We say, look, we're going to give you 20% more. We really no business ourselves. Sure, we'll give you better quality. The same junk. So finally, out of frustration, one day, I got the assistant manager in this hotel, this little residential hotel where there was it had 6 rooms. The assistant manager there, a guy called Karim, I said, take me to the tailor market. I want, I'm so frustrated. I can't deal with these guys. I just want a tailor and say, make it this way for me. And I want to get it right. So we did. We went and we hired one tailor. Here he is. And then we raised it to 3 tailors. And then we raised it to 20 people. And we rented, frankly, a luxury home in one of the best parts of town, which happened to be near my hotel. And the prices in Afghanistan at the time, they were so ridiculous. It's like the hotel I was staying at, believe it or not, the price per night was 20 Afghanis. That was like 28 cents for a hotel room. Meals were like 10 Afs, like 14 cents. Like you could go a day, it comes to, I spent 85 cents today, for doing things. Anyway, this, by the way, is our team. This really was the founding team we had in Kabul. And I could talk about each of these people. And, we primarily got people from the Hazara tribe, which is a very, very downtrodden tribe in Afghanistan, remains a downtrodden tribe. The Taliban was the worst thing that ever happened to the Hazara, because they are also Shia, more tied with the Iranian side of Islam. In any case, but this was basically another, clear shift that we did. It was a pivot. We were now no longer just an importer. We were a manufacturer. And you got to realize sometimes, this is really one of the most important points. It's only in retrospect that you realize how key a certain move was. I mean, just getting that assistant tailor, the cost was nothing. The house was costing us, I don't know, $120 a month or something. These weren't costs, but you make some of these moves, they're little things, but they change the world for you. And this was tremendously impactful in that all of a sudden, all that energy that was going into fighting each other was, we had a collaborative environment now. We were all trying to do the same thing. And the quality issue, frankly, well, it was still an issue and we still had to deal with it. But, we had an order of magnitude jump. So you can imagine, this changed the competitive environment completely. We had no idea what we were doing. We didn't realize what had occurred as a result of it. But it happened. We then hired our first designer in Boston. We really realized, look, sooner or later, everyone else is going to get access to the same crap we were getting. And we need to differentiate. Now, we had some differentiated things because we had lucked out because this Dutch girl had done some things in Kabul, but we felt we had to do it. So we brought in a designer, and the editorial support just rocketed hugely. Now we were getting Vogue, Mademoiselle, Cosmo, and further support. Excuse me. So then this was a third pivot, if you really think about it. We were now shifting from a manufacturer to a designer where we could have really unique things available in the marketplace. Before we go next, I'd like to show you something. To give you a sense of what we were doing, this is an Afghan chador. It's an Afghan veil. This is where the woman puts her head, so this is where the eyes go. So she's seeing through here. Does anyone want to try this? Guys or girls? Okay. Here's another one. They're actually quite beautiful things. They're really horrible to be inside. I've tried it actually. It's really claustrophobic. You have to get used to it, etc. But these are commodities in Afghanistan, and when you look at it, really, it's a beautiful thing. The back is this gorgeous pleating. This is all done by hand. This is all hand embroidery here that you're seeing. This isn't hand done. But if you take this, what we did, we had one designer who took this, and frankly, at the time, she didn't even do it with a sewing machine. She just cut and paste, literally with staples and masking tape, this into that blouse or into that dress. But let's look at this dress specifically. So this is the same thing. It's just taking the same raw materials and sort of reconfiguring it. So this is now on the belly button, right? You can see it. This is all the back. And the back had an interesting thing. These we can just, anyone, if you want to look at it, you're welcome to just pass it around. I wanted to show you the cost structure to give you a sense of the economics of this thing. The raw materials, that chador that you're seeing, in Afghanistan, cost, at the peak, it came to $1.75, okay, cost. And we bought it in the market. The labor to it for the tailors was about 55 cents to turn that into a dress. Then we had some indirect costs. And we were really going to town. And ultimately, by the way, we started doing like benefits in Afghanistan, which were like really, really completely unheard of. I mean, the wealth effect was just mind-blowing what you could do. But so the freight on board cost, in other words, what it costs you to buy the materials, the labor, the putting it together and packaging, and then freight on board was $2.70. Between shipping, customs, and brokerage, it still came to $4.97, under $5, for a dress which we were wholesaling at 140 we were wholesaling at 70 in the US, and it was selling between 150 and 450, the 450 being some of the more overseas markets like London, etc. So it's like, even at the wholesale of 70, you're talking 93% margin, gross margin. This is mind-blowing kinds of numbers. Now, we didn't have these kinds of numbers on everything we did. This was sort of an extreme. But when you have something like this, you've really got, you've got a wild tiger by the, you're riding. And there's going to be a lot of people coming to try to take it from you. Yes?
What was the brand name of the dress?
Kandahar Designs was the brand.
And the designer was the woman from Boston?
we started really investing in the design thing. So we ended up with a team of like 6, 7 people in Boston. Yeah, they were doing all the design. And guess what? When you have these kinds of margins and these kinds of profits, you can start doing all kinds of wild experimentation. So one of the ways, I mean, one of the ways we were doing it was by really trying to do development, the work that, the UNDP was attempting to do, but in a really dramatic and a much more direct way rather than a more administrative way. So I want to give you a sense of like what this meant at the time. This was really a dream opportunity for me and my team from 2 perspectives. First of all, it was the whole idea of development. And in Farsi we have an expression. You say, Afghanistan, Iran sat sal pish. Afghanistan, Iran of 100 years ago. So I used to really think about it in a very warm, special way, like it's the poor cousin who's sort of like not sophisticated, the country folks, etc., as the Afghans. So the idea of really embracing these guys and making a difference and doing development and experimenting, it really was an incredible dream for me. At the same time, I was 22 years old, and my team, the whole company was like, everyone was under 25. And so being in the fashion world at the time, the whole LA and New York scene and stuff, this was a world we had no view of, leave alone being a real part of it and really engaging in it and, being able to combine these 2 things and have the freedom of like your own venture. And the ability to travel to Afghanistan and all these places was just an incredible, wonderful, wonderful experience. It was also a dream opportunity in the sense of, a team of close friends. This was sort of some of the core team in Boston originally. You're seeing these antique pictures. And these ultimately became the principal producers for us. They led operations in Afghanistan, these guys. And it really was, I viewed them as my brothers. I really, really did. And I know it was the same. So that's one thing, guys. When you do ventures, if you do it with people you really love and you really care about and everything, these ventures have so much more power, so much more force. Because you're not just doing it for the money. You're not just even doing it for yourself. When you're doing it with that, there's situations you face where you say, I want to throw in the towel, but I can't do it with Jill on the team. And, with the rest, I'm going to do it for the team. Anyway. So these are really the softer things which make an incredible difference. And then we got a lucky break. I mean, really, when things go well, things go really well. Yves Saint Laurent, the great French designer, he went totally ethnic. And the demand we were facing just went really crazy. It really was like amazing. Like all of a sudden, we weren't even at shows. Companies were calling us and, making demands on us. So at that point we said, hey, let's go global. And to realize, to have an American, a team that's designing in the US, to believe that it can go to France and Germany and England and Tokyo, etc. at the time with a collection was a joke. No one did it. The importing was always coming from Europe to the US. So frankly, the American, the Commerce Department, they heard about us and they were like completely ecstatic and like trying to encourage us and give us resources because, hey, we were sort of ending up, being an export deal. In any case, we entered the major European exhibitions, the Pret-à-Porter in Paris, the Igedo in Dusseldorf, and London Fashion Week. And of course, we started with a press offensive, and the press loved the stuff. And frankly, that led to, I want you to give a sense, many years of really nice growth. 7 years of expanding in Kabul and in the US, in Boston. We really established this clear leadership of this space. We were like the leading producer of like quality goods coming out of Afghanistan, and we were doing volume. This thing scaled, so like we had about 1,000 people involved in the operation. So, you know, some things were really happening. And we had a retail following. There were people that really were interested in the collections we were doing. There was a wealth effect that it created, both in Kabul and in Boston. In Kabul, that guy, the assistant manager in the hotel, he now had a driver and a Mercedes and, you know, a whole different lifestyle. The tailors, I mean, you know, they had kept bringing their relatives in, etc., as further tailors, but like there were whole villages that were really, it had had a transformative effect in terms of these folks, and of course we had virtually no employee losses. On the US side also, we started getting really used to living really well and traveling really well, and you know, it became like the company really became an engine for maintaining our lifestyle. At the same time, you know, when you're successful, like this process of, I say, strategic sloth and growing cost structure, you know, our cost structure was certainly going up, and we were still the leader, we were still the very best, but the difference between what we were doing and what the competitors was doing was getting less than what it had been before. And we were sort of, you know, you get used to it and, you know, you feel like, hey, we're hot. We will remain hot. And also the trend which we were riding, and we shifted out of the pure ethnic thing once we got really fashion, but still we were getting a lot of support and value and money just from the core ethnic trend that existed. And that trend was really kind of coming down. And then geopolitical turmoil occurs where, first of all, you had the Iran Revolution and the fall of the Shah, which was a cataclysmic event for me. My family now was in difficulty. My father was being questioned, etc. And immediately afterwards, if you remember, the Soviet reaction to the Iran turmoil was to try to take over the government in Afghanistan and then ultimately the invasion. And this led to like horrific logistical difficulties for us. And frankly, you know, you started losing tailors. So I remember then at this point, you got to understand, this is the only thing I've ever done. And you know, in Iran, we didn't have a tradition of summer jobs. So I had never had a job. Really, the only thing I'd ever done was this crazy thing out of Afghanistan as a job. I've now done it for like 7, 8 years, so it's really defined my self-identity. And we had gone through a lot. You know, how much can you cover in a talk like this? But you know, there had been a huge earthquake in Afghanistan. Dealing with it had not been easy, but we had managed. There had been a coup d'etat, where the king was overthrown and his cousin took over and declared it a republic. You know, that led to some violence, etc. But we had recovered. So I'm hoping, well, we'll get through this. And the man here, he's Tom Freston, and this is Jill, his designer. They were our principal competitor, a company called Hindu Kush. They were significantly smaller than us, but they were still a quality, serious operation based out of New York. And I remember, you know, and we had become really friends, because guess what? You're hanging out in Afghanistan, you know, frankly, many nights, you know, 2, 3 nights a week, we'd go out to dinner together and party together. So I remember one night, Tom said, you know, Ali, this thing is over. And my view, and I remember this conversation so well, my view was like, no, Tom, what do you mean it's over? Look, we got through the coup, we got through the earthquake, we've been through all kinds of embargo, we'll get through the invasion. And he was like, Ellie, you don't get it. This is really a different kind of a situation. Anyway, I said, I don't believe it. And if you're so confident, I bought it at a really good price. We acquired our key competitor. We doubled down. By the way, I should pause for a moment. The way things go is amazing. Tom Freston left this, and he was with us for 6 months on a part-time basis, for doing the transition. While he was doing that transition with us, guess what he did for his next move? He co-founded MTV, which is probably the most profitable media property in history. It's really unbelievable. And he was chairman of MTV till 2 years ago, when he was fired. But with a $50 million exit package, so not bad. The war was really led to like logistical nightmare. And, we started losing like crazy. Taylor started disappearing, and these were really our friends and brothers who were disappearing. And, we started going down the tubes, basically. So Tom was right, an invasion is different. I had many failures here, and it's really sort of an interesting thing to look at. There was obviously a horrific failure to understand that we need to diversify our production. We had talked about doing things. We had played with doing things, but we had never done it. And now we were going to face the consequences. This was a cataclysmic failure for the Taylors. I mean, they had built a whole life around this, and they had, over the years, they had really, their whole style of living, their view of the world, was now different. And frankly, that was the thing which at the time myself and some of the team was so focused on. It was like, what is going to happen to these people? So anyway, it was obviously a huge failure from that. And then on a personal perspective, I hadn't seen any difference between the company and myself. So, the idea of like, hey, you save money personally, you buy a house personally. At this point, I have a wife, we have a 5-year-old son, and my wife is pregnant when this thing is really descending into oblivion. I had obviously, had a terrible failure. I had now put my family in jeopardy. Another horrific outcome. And obviously my self-worth, what was it? The only thing I knew was this. My social circles were based on this. And I'll tell you, it's really, I remember once when we shut that down, I sort of, I called up a friend, a photographer friend who, we hung out a lot. Hey, Ed, you want to get together? And he says, Eli, today is not good for me. What do? I'm completely associating this with my failure. When I was a big shot, you think he'd have said that to me? And of course he'd have said that to me. But you start seeing everything as a reflection on how horrible you are. So anyway, I sort of was wandering the desert for a couple of years. Wandering the desert is really hard. So at one point I said, no, there's still hope here. So I'm going to salvage something. So I'm going to start a company now called Dada, where we're going to use some of the same designers, much more contemporary. We're going to be producing elsewhere. And basically we went through a year of convulsions, and I see it as like the kick of the dying mule, and the thing ended. So, was this a failure? Of course it was a failure. I mean, it was a disaster. It was a personal failure, it was a business failure. This wonderful thing that was going no longer did. And the one good thing about it was that it was, at this point, it was clear-cut end. I had tried, I had done the kick of the dying mule, and it was like, I was ready to say, I need a fresh start. I need a clean start. Looking at it also as a failure, it's kind of interesting. If we go back to the beginning, the first trip to Afghanistan, I mean, it was obviously very, very stupid moves. All 3 moves were crazy and stupid, right? All were bad failures, except that you needed to do the 3 stupid things to maybe have a chance. There was a silver lining. It would have never been able to happen if we hadn't done those crazy, stupid things when we started. But it's also, it's also an opportunity. I mean, did I fail in that case? Of course. It was a huge failure. But frankly, is there any way I'd have left the clothing business? Is there any way I'd have left the fashion business unless I was just kicked out of it permanently and boldly and definitively? No. With what I've done since, frankly, what we did at Kandahar Designs is an interesting, fun little story. I mean, the scale of it, the impact of it, I don't know. It's still certainly a personal favorite, but in terms of, I am really happy personally that I got ejected because I found all kinds of new worlds, all kinds of far more interesting, exciting experiences, and frankly, avenues to vastly more wealth than I could imagine at the time of that. So on the one hand, it was a failure. On the other hand, it was really essential for me to take the next steps